Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I am so excited about the topic we're going to be talking about today. Today, we're talking about voting, and specifically about young people in voting, and even more specifically about the challenges that young people face when trying to register to vote and to actually go vote on election day. So obviously a really timely topic given where we are with the presidential election. So I'm really excited to be joined by three wonderful people from an organization called YVote, and I'll let Sanda talk about YVote in a moment. But it's an awesome organization that mobilizes the youth vote and helps young people understand the importance of voting, understands the importance of being involved in the political process in this country, and most importantly, gets young people to go out and vote in elections, which is just awesome. So thank you all for joining us. I'm gonna let all three of you do a quick intro of yourselves, and then we'll jump right into the questions. So Sanda, I'll turn it over to you to start with the intros.
Thank you, Ted, and thank you for having us on today. I am Sanda Balaban. I am a co-founder and director of YVote and Next Generation Politics.
Yeah, I'm Kekeli Amekudzi. I'm a high school student, currently going to Birkhahn Technical High School, and I'm just like doing YVote because I found that like voting is really important in order to drive and manifest change, and it's one of like the easiest like toolkits that's like accessible to all of us.
Hi, my name is Yessii Burgos, or known as Yessii. I'm the social media director and facilitator at YVote. I was actually a founding member of YVote. I currently go to Baruch College and I'm entering my third year.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for all of you joining us today. Sanda, I'm going to start with you. Tell us about YVote, what it is, what your mission is, and what you're trying to achieve.
Sure, happy to. And I'll tell you that through the lens of why we started YVote. So we launched YVote on the heels of the 2016 election, which for me, as for many, was a very stark wake-up call. You know, living in a progressive bubble in New York, I awoke on November 9th pretty shocked by the outcome of that election. And first I went into a deep depression, and then I went into deep analysis. Psychoanalysis maybe would have been helpful, but I went into data analysis. And that brought me to look at what had and hadn't happened in the election. And as a lifelong educator and youth developer, I was particularly looking at what the implications for young people were. And at that point, so we're talking about November 2016, we didn't yet have the results to know the specifics of youth voting, but I looked at the 2014 midterm results, and I saw that just 14% of 18 and 19-year-olds had voted. 14% in the midterms. And at the same time, I had recently rewatched the Eyes on the Prize civil rights documentary series, and I've been watching the footage of Freedom Summer 1964, and a moment in time when you had thousands of young people who were literally putting their lives on the line for a cause that they believed in, which was voting. And so to see that just 50 years later, that value proposition had changed, that it wasn't having the level of interest and engagement that we would have anticipated, made me ask the question, why vote? WHY vote, as well as why for youth vote. And so that led to saying, okay, well, rather than just talking about or thinking about young people, we've got to engage young people in asking themselves and their peers this question. And so we created an inquiry-based process that led to the creation of YVote. And we've been really fortunate over the last 3.5 years to work with amazing young people like Kekeli and Yessii to really build this out and to really look at how do we motivate and mobilize young people. So the core goal of YVote is how do we help young people connect their passions and beliefs with how they can make a difference at and beyond the ballot box. And we're very much about working at the intersection of individual activism, collective action, and electoral politics, and really thinking about the multiple levers of power and influence that young people have, particularly their collective power as part of the largest, most diverse, most progressive demographic that our country has. And so if indeed, young people use their collective power, they can change the political landscape overnight. And we see many manifestations of this happening, and we need to continue and increase that and ensure that it also, plays out, at every election.
That's great, Sanda. I really appreciate that intro. Yessii, I want to turn to you and ask you a question. We talk in this country and most recently a lot about voter suppression issues and challenges. My question for you is, can you tell us and describe a bit the obstacles that young people face on the path to registering to vote and also to actually getting to the polls on election day? Can you talk us through what some of those obstacles are like for those who may not be aware of them?
Yeah, definitely. I want to start off by saying it all depends on the root of the issue, which is we don't have enough civic education in schools, and that's what YVote promotes. So we're trying to get students to go outside of their schools to find civic education and also promote civic educations in schools as much as we can. Because if someone doesn't know about civics or voting, they're not going to go and fill out a voter registration form. And in particular, in New York City, we have a lot of barriers, which include not having a driver's license because not many of us drive, and not having an ID because we don't find ourselves going into the DMV once we turn 18, due to the fact of the matter that we don't think we need to drive because we have so much accessibility with public transportation. So that sets a barrier online, because online voter registration in New York right now, it's not accessible as we think. If you do not have a driver's license or a New York State ID, you're not allowed to register to vote. And we're trying to push that onto our state in particular, and many other states I believe have. I just can't talk for them because that's my knowledge is in New York right now. But we're trying to push that so that young people are able to vote, register to vote. And also back to the civic education, if young people don't know what they're voting for, they're not going to vote, they're not going to find interest. I found myself in that position in high school where I took a youth activism course. Luckily, I had that civic opportunity in my school, but not many in New York City do, which is super frustrating for me to know about, because I had to educate everybody in my household due to the fact that nobody learned in their school that it's important to vote. And it's your civic duty, and so many people, like Sanda said, actually fought for this right, and not many people use that advantage to actually go out and vote. So yeah, the problem is really civic education in schools, and getting them able to actually know about what they're voting for, why they're voting, who fought for those votes. It's not just having this social studies class that tells you, oh, 19 whatever, we were able to vote, and it progressed through different races and different genders. So.
That's great. Yes, I appreciate that answer. Kekeli, I want to turn to you. What do you say to other kids your age who are apathetic about voting or show little interest in the political process, or even to adults who have kids who are of age, able to vote, but don't really see the point in it? You hear a lot, well, my vote doesn't really count, does it? What do you say to young people to convince them that every vote does count and that they should get involved, whether it's like what you're doing with YVote or even just simply registering and going to the polls on election day?
Yeah, well, I think that trying to reach out to people who feel apathetic, because I was in that position, and it's just communicating the basic understanding of voting is not everything. Voting is just the first step, and all of our problems are not going to change through voting. But especially when it comes to local elections, when it's I know most of us and most of the people I know are dealing with the problems of gentrification. I recently learned that it's your city council member who's able to choose what developers get, what zones they get to get, and approve whether they're able to build their projects, which can end up starting gentrification and raising the value and pushing poor people and lower income people out. So it's really just mapping issues out in which people can relate, where it's like if you're dealing with gentrification and like you don't know where to start and you just think that, well, nothing's going to change, it's like you don't even just have to focus on the presidential election. Look locally, because like that's where you can create the most amount of change. And that's when you realize that you want to make sure whoever is dealing specifically in your neighborhood and community is not just for big dollars or big donors, but it's actually for you and your community, cares about what's going on, cares about the people currently there, and will fight to make sure that your community is up to par and that people can continuously live and not be pushed out. So when it comes to like adults, like 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds and trying to get them to vote, it's like, that's a process where it's like, in this day and age, a lot more people are becoming galvanized. So like the job is definitely becoming easier. But when it comes to like 18 and 19-year-olds, it's just a matter of like, when you're dealing with things like college and student loan debt and those like that future that like awaits you, I think those are like really key things in being able to like motivate like college age like students in order to get them to like vote, because it's like you do realize that like programs have to be set aside in order to make sure your life is just livable, that like you're able to like continuously live on your life like 10 years in the future and you won't have student loans like creeping over your shoulder.
That's really, really well said, and a very good point around the local and and state elections versus the presidential election. Because I do think a lot of young people think of voting in the context of for the president. And you're right, so much goes on at the local and state levels that affect our lives every day, especially as a young person who's just on the cusp of their, secondary education potentially, and then their careers. It's a really, really valid point. Sanda, you cited some pretty grim research at the beginning of this conversation around the lack of young people who turn out to vote. Do you sense it being different this time around, this election? Are you encouraged by what you're seeing and hearing through your work with YVote? What can we expect come November when it comes to the youth vote?
I wish I had a crystal ball to tell you that, and I feel like I won't sleep really well until sometime in November. I love what Kekeli said about our work is becoming easier as young people are galvanized. I'm not sure. I hope that you're right, Kekeli, but I think part of our work is to make those linkages. It's one thing to be energized, to go out into the streets, to protest, to have mass movements, but I think we need to demonstrate how voting is part of that larger equation. And as both Yessii and Kekeli have said, we don't do a great job of that in our schools. And so part of our work is demystifying and really making those connections. So also connected to what Kekeli was saying about, we really try to tap into what is it that a given young person cares about. Is that mass incarceration, and criminal justice reform? Is that immigration? Is that affordability? And then really show how you can have an impact on that. And so I do think that there is more effort around that, and that we just need to continue to advance and accelerate that work. I think we have the challenge of, given that we're in a pandemic and many young people will be doing remote learning and just are compromised and constrained in many ways. And as Yessii talked about, in New York currently, we don't have a way for young people to register online if they don't have a driver's license or state ID. That is a huge barrier. We had a number of things lined up for last spring around voter registration that we couldn't do because they entailed working in person. And we've been doing a ton online, but at the end of the day, we need to ensure that young people can register to vote and that they know how to cast a vote and ensure that that vote is cast. And to your earlier questions about voter suppression, as we've seen from what's happening in the post office to also just lack of information and access, lack of accurate information about what people have to do. Another challenge that I think we're going to face in November, and this is a long-standing problem that's been exacerbated and compounded by the pandemic, as so many things have, is that everyone is going to have to do things significantly in advance. You can't wake up on November 3rd and say, oh, I think I'll vote today, and have that be successful in many cases. And young people have a lot on their plates, especially 18-year-olds who are starting college in many cases are doing that in a remote context where they're trying to get their bearing. And so I think it would be naive to think that priority number one, above this other totem pole of priorities, is going to be figuring out what to vote and how to vote. And how to make informed choices. So that's a lot of the work that we've been doing this summer, and that we'll be continuing to do over the fall, and that we need as many partners and allies and collaborators in order to have the biggest impact, nationwide, that we can.
And bridging from that to you, Yessii, I have a question for you, and then Kekeli, I'm going to end with you with a final question. Yessii, briefly walk our listeners and viewers through, what are you going to be doing between now and Election Day as part of your involvement with YVote? I think people would benefit from really understanding just the role that someone like you is going to play between now and Election Day.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to start off by saying that we actually did a voter mobilization website to allow people to click through and understand where they're going to, if they're going in person or if they're doing absentee. We explain the process, what they need to fill out, because that envelope is not that satisfying getting in the mail, and then there's so much to fill out, and certain parts have to be blank, and a lot of people actually fill out those blank parts. I had a lot of friends call me. So being able to be a resource when it comes to YVote's online aspect, since I'm the social media director, I'm lucky enough to know how to do the web design and know how to help youth engage in it. So using colors that youth actually engage with, and helping them and showing them that it's very simple. It's just, it takes a little bit of reading. We try to minimize our words, but obviously doing that. And also we're thinking about doing Instagram slideshows. If you've seen they're PowerPoint slideshows, but for Instagram, explaining what we're going to do, using videos. And our main goal is for youth turnout. So although we only work with high school students, we know that they're encouraging their cousins, their friends, and if they're turning 18, our main goal is to get them out the first election to go vote, because then they'll be able to vote for a lifetime. It's a proven fact that if you vote in the first election, the first 3 elections, you're able to go ahead and vote for your lifetime, because you see the importance of it. So what I would be doing with YVote is facilitating as well in the fall, and using our online aspects to get youth engaged in New York and across the country if we can.
Awesome. So you got a lot of work cut out for you between now and Election Day. It's
in
great.
addition
and
to being a full-time college student and working with the census.
Right?
I hear you. It's so impressive. And Kekeli, just to sort of take us home here, if someone's sitting at home on the couch right now and sort of wants to get involved but not really sure how to do it, what's your advice to them? What would you say to them to say, hey, listen, you have a chance to make a difference and to have an impact. What's the one thing they can do between now and Election Day that will make a difference?
Yeah, like Sanda put in the chat, support YVote, join your local YVote chapter if it's near you. One thing I can definitely say is, although I got involved into just this work last year through climate and climate justice, and that's what really got me involved in this work, and then I kind of just funneled through different organizations. It's definitely one thing you can always do is call your local representative, look for bills that are able to support or encourage voter turnout, check your senators, check your council members, check your mayors, check all members, and just continuously be active in lobbying as a constituent for whatever needs that you have, because that's really a very important piece that not enough people do, and not enough people realize the power that they have. when it comes to the representatives.
Great. Kekeli, Sanda, and Yessii, I cannot thank you enough for spending this time with me. I've had a great time talking about this important topic. I am so excited on behalf of Hot Paper Lantern to be involved now in YVote and to be hopefully working alongside each and every one of you and others too as we get to know the organization. So appreciate it. This will not be the last conversation we have, I promise. I want to get back on. I want to do another one of these, maybe closer to election day or maybe just after election day. We'll play that by ear. But in the meantime, thank you, be safe, and keep up the great work. And we'll talk soon.
Thanks so much for having us with you today and for all the work you're doing with Hot Paper Lantern.
Thank you.